The casting needs to be degassed as the first step in the fusing procedure. The purpose of degassing is to burn out any inclusions of investment and abrasive, and also to oxidize the surface. The degassing procedure is done by heating the casting to 1925 degrees in an air-fired oven. There are tin and iron oxides in the metal, and these oxides will help form the adhesion of the porcelain to the metal. The dials are set to 1925, and then when the temperature has reached this point, the casting will be removed and cooled. The oxidized casting will have a dull surface, and this is removed from the oven and placed on an asbestos slab and then covered with a small cup. The first stage in applying the porcelain is to mix the opaque porcelain. The purpose of the opaque porcelain is to mask the gold color and to adhere to the gold casting. The proper shade is chosen and is placed on a tile. A stay wet solution is also placed on the slab. A creamy mix of porcelain is made to apply to the metal crown. The casting is rather difficult to handle, so a hemostat will be used to grasp the casting. This is applied to the lingual surface. It makes a convenient handle in holding the casting while the opaque is being applied. The opaque is called paint opaque and will be painted on the labial surface. This is very carefully applied so that porcelain will not go on the internal surface of the casting. It is important that the entire labial surface is covered and that the metal does not show through. Also, just the areas where the porcelain is to be applied are covered. Vibration helps in the condensation of the porcelain. Also, a gauze or a tissue can be used to blot out additional moisture. This helps condense the porcelain and make it more dense. The casting is placed on a little spike, and then this is placed again in the ceramic oven. The porcelain is dried on the apron of the oven. This allows gentle heating of the porcelain. The porcelain then is placed into the oven, and the oven door is closed, and this will be heated to 1700 degrees under a vacuum. Vacuum-fired porcelain is a denser, tougher piece of porcelain, so that the first 1700 degrees of fusion is done under a vacuum of 25 to 29 inches of mercury. When the vacuum has reached this level, the pump is turned off, and this vacuum is held during the initial baking. At this time, the rheostat is changed and the temperature is raised to 1700 degrees. When the oven has reached 1700 degrees, the vacuum is released, and any additional heating now will be done under air firing. In this case, we'll be raising the temperature to 1825 degrees. So 125 degrees will be done under air firing. This is an automatic oven, so we will simply set the dials to 1825. At 1825, the oven is opened, and the hot porcelain will be removed and placed on an asbestos block and covered with a metal tin so that air currents will not cool the porcelain and crack it. It's important to cover this so that there are no distortions in this porcelain. The baked opaque porcelain has a stippled, glassy appearance, as you see here. Gingival-bodied porcelain is mixed and applied, in this case, with a spatula. It can be applied with a brush or with a spatula. In this case, we're using a spatula to add the porcelain and carefully blot the porcelain. The purpose of blotting is to condense the porcelain to make it more dense. Here we roughly form the contours of this crown. The die is placed back into the articulator, and incisal colored porcelain is added. The contacts are made with the adjacent teeth, remembering that there's going to be a 20% shrinkage when we bake this porcelain. The porcelain is further blotted and contoured. It can be carved and shaped to the approximate shape that we would like in the final restoration. It is trimmed away from the interproximal area so the die can be removed. More incisal porcelain is added on the lingual surface, and you'll note how the moisture can be reduced by blotting. Additional porcelain is added on the lingual surface, and this can be brushed also to give it a smoother surface and to blend the porcelain into the existing porcelain. After blotting, we can take a sharp instrument and open up the embrasure areas to make sure again that we have the contours, and we can remove the die. We are trying to match the cuspid on the other side. And since this is a peg lateral, we have some additions to make and some changes to make on this incisal edge to make it look the same as the cuspid on the other side. Here we're using a brush to contour the porcelain and to smooth and brush the excess away. The incisal, again, is further modified to match the cuspid on the other side of the arch. And is further blotted to remove the moisture. Brushing also helps condense the porcelain. Distilled water is used to clean the porcelain off the casting and the internal surface of the casting. The porcelain is placed on the apron of the oven and is allowed to dry and to heat. And you will note soon the porcelain will become brownish. This is the starch that is used to hold the porcelain together, burning out. The purpose of the starch is to hold the porcelain together so it will not fall apart when we're condensing. When this has been heated sufficiently, it will be placed in the oven and then heated to 1700 degrees under vacuum, and then an additional 100 degrees air fired. The fused porcelain is examined and then is placed on the articulator, you'll notice that the mesial contact is open because of the shrinkage of the porcelain. The distal also is slightly open. And there is a slight concavity on the labial surface. Additions now will be made to that porcelain. The lingual surface also needs to be adjusted. It is rather thick. So a porcelain grinding wheel will be used to contour that surface of the restoration. Modifications of anatomy also can be made at this time. Porcelain then is added on the mesial and distal contact to build this out. It is blotted in the same manner as we did before in fabricating the original porcelain. Additions can be made 7 or 8 times in this manner, so it is very easy to fabricate this type of restoration. The embrasure areas are opened up again so that the die and the restoration can be removed easily. And a brush is used to blend the additions of porcelain to the existing porcelain. The contact areas are blended into the rest of the restoration by using a wet brush. Any other blending is done at this time with this fine hair brush. The restoration is placed in an oven and the temperature is brought up to 1700 degrees under vacuum. Then the vacuum is released and the temperature brought up to 1800 degrees to obtain a natural glaze on the porcelain metal restoration. The restoration is placed on the model and compared with the cuspid. The peg lateral restoration needs to have further modifications to the incisal edge. If slight modifications are made, they can be polished. If several modifications are made, the restoration may be reglazed in the oven. When we're happy with the porcelain, then the gold will be polished. We will be using a rubber wheel. This can be either a Kratex or a Dedico rubber wheel. Also BBC on a felt wheel. And then lastly, we'll be using rouge on a felt wheel. This will give a final polish to the metal. It's important to have a high polish so that plaque will not be retained in this marginal area. Here we see the final restoration, which is high glaze and its incisal contouring that gives it a natural appearance.